Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis. This show is a series that's been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is called Humanity's Legacy. Thank you to DCTV, to Mo Jackson, who's studio producer, and Cruchet Starnes is on audio and prompter, and Dolores Harris is our floor director, and I want to thank Cruchet for his volunteering. Last weekend, I went to a memorial service for Virginia Huber. We all call her by her nickname, Ginny. Ginny wanted for her legacy to continue. Ginny and her family and friends taught me about legacies, and this includes the legacy that José Rizal left to humanity, the world's wealth. Let's talk a little more about what was in the lesson Ginny taught me about legacies. A legacy helps you to remember the person who gave you the legacy. And we're not going to play the song by the Scottish poet Robert Burns. It's Auld Lang Syne, and it's actually a nice recording, but I decided not to sing it for you. The 19th century scholar and educationalist J.S. Blackie summed up Burns's importance to Scotland and the Scots with the words, "When Scotland forgets Burns, then history will forget Scotland." On the internet, this quote is under the word legacy. Ginny touched many lives, and some of the people spoke about what Ginny had meant to them during Ginny's memorial service. Ginny's relationships mattered. The lesson for me from Ginny's memorial service was that my relationship to the people involved in José Rizal's legacy also matters. I'm the lawyer for the world's wealth. My job has a fancy title, Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility. The word debt comes in because the world's corrupt money system, in that system, debt equals money. We're ending this corruption in a global currency reset. Fancy words are usually there so that people can confuse you and rob you. I've learned in my job to use plain words so that everyone knows what I mean. Everybody is going to trade the fake paper money for money that has gold in a flat envelope, or for money that you can use locally in your town. We're all going to take our time in the global currency reset. This is because we all need to understand what's happening. So if the things I'm telling you aren't clear, just ask questions when I upload the segment tonight on YouTube. I've been answering your questions in this series. Let's talk about the legacy that José Rizal left. We've been talking about this big legacy for the last 3 years. This series is called the Network of Global Corporate Control because that is the name we're using for the group that's been trying to keep us from our legacy. Our legacy also has a name. It's called the Proclamation and Declaration of the Gift of Love. José Rizal is the name of the man who gave us our legacy, and Ferdinand Marcos was his lawyer. José Rizal gave us this legacy in 1949, but we're keeping it secret to keep it safe for today and prevent anyone from stealing it. And now, of course, we're not trying to keep it secret. We're trying to let everybody know about it. In the script for this series on YouTube, you can read the document where José Rizal deposited the world's assets in the trust for our legacy. What's in the legacy? The world's monetary gold reserves. We're going to use these reserves in our money. There's also art, gemstones, silver, and other precious metals, and other treasures in our legacy. Above all, there's over $2 quadrillion worth of Treaty of Versailles Bonds. This is the mechanism that we have to establish our relationship with the Banking Cartel and it assures us of victory. We are beneficiaries of the trust that contains the world's wealth. It's vast. The banking cartel has a huge problem with the fact that we see the corruption in the money systems so clearly, and that we know that José Rizal has laid all the groundwork for us to unwind this corruption peacefully. In next week's segment, we're going to talk more about the peaceful way to transition. In the meantime, I just want to point out how everything the banking cartel tries, when we know so much, only makes them more vulnerable, and they're on the way out. For example, there's a man named Gary Calelo who said, "Mrs. Karen, did you know that José Rizal, what you're talking about, it's only a code name?" And so Leo Freeman answered that comment. "Interesting. Could you possibly elaborate?" However, the signature of Father Jose Antonio Diaz and the remarkable similarities with José Rizal's signatures, I can't believe they're only coincidental. And you can see for yourself in a link that I have in the teleprompter how similar those signatures are. And we're scrolling through the link. It's a long link. And then we hear from Leo Freeman. In my humble opinion, José Rizal and Father Diaz are the same person. And Father Diaz is the name that José Rizal used when he went to the Vatican, and he rose up through the ranks, and he became the Black Pope, which is the person who leads the Jesuits. And he had the wealth of the Vatican at his disposal, and that's what he used to make the deposit in the global debt facility. For the rest of this segment, I'm going to talk about my relationship to the beneficiaries of the trust containing the world's wealth, and my relationship to the other members on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. I say other members because I represent the United States on the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors are supposed to authenticate the withdrawals from the global debt facility. That means certify the signature for withdrawals. I found out I was overseer mandate trustee from one of the crooks who was trying to steal from the global debt facility. And I've given you a link in the teleprompter. You can see what he said to me. The people appointed by Donald Trump, they were not duly appointed since the Constitution of the United States is not in effect. So they're not on the Board of Governors. The U.S. Constitution has not been in effect since 1861. The former executive director on the board of the World Bank representing the United States broke the Articles of the World Bank, and he was fired. My relationship to the group that's at the center of the banking cartel, that is the bloodline families descended from the pharaohs in Egypt, it's not close. I've made it clear to everyone that the bloodline families were collecting money that they were not entitled to because of corruption. I believe that I may have met several of these people, although at the time they hid from me who they were. I've written to other very wealthy individuals who were holding bonds issued by the Federal Reserve Bank and who offered to do their part to end the corruption. The global debt facility is using these bonds to wind down the banking cartel, because the banking cartel owes more than $2 quadrillion under these bonds that are called Treaty of Versailles Bonds. I've been very busy in preparing for this segment so that I'm able to describe my relationships to you. This is because going forward, I'm going to be telling you about what's going on with these groups. I'm in the center of these groups. My job has everything to do with the budgets for all of the military powers in the world. And what's more, the military powers all know this. I don't say this to be authoritarian because that will not work. I say it in order that there is a peaceful transition above all. Ultimately, we're all going to be on board. It's up to all of us to bring people on board. We're very likely to be able to do this, and this is based on our progress to date. That is, not a single military power or country has denied our reality. My statement that Donald Trump is not the Commander-in-Chief of the United States stands. Now I want to change the subject and talk about mind control. A couple of days ago, Pamela Hornvik sent me in an email letting me know that the banking cartel is interfering with people who try to watch the archives of the DCT segments in this series by making the people fall asleep. We could already tell that there was interference because the banking cartel lowered the sound, and they also inserted black leaders to delay the videos. And I'll read you from Pamela Hornvik's email. It was sent on the 22nd. To Karen Hudes, subject, hypnotism. Hi Karen, I just wanted you to know that whenever I watch your show live, I'm very intent on your every word. However, whenever I watch the session on YouTube, if I didn't get to watch the live broadcast, I will invariably fall asleep. I don't think this is boring, do you? I wouldn't put it past them to dub some kind of mind control over your recording. I'm just wondering if anyone else may have that problem, and you can weigh in on the archives in YouTube. Thanks for all that you do, Pam. As I mentioned before, the fact that YouTube is trying to erase all record of what's happening between us is their admission that it's dangerous to the network of global corporate control. That's because we're setting the agenda, and the banking cartel is not, no matter how hard they try to convince you otherwise. I'm the first to admit that there are many people who are totally convinced that the propaganda from the media and the mind control apparatus that keeps these dupes from seeing clearly what's going on in front of their very noses, these are all very real. I'm surrounded by family members who are victims of mind control, and I know very well how threatening the reality is for these victims. The only way to function during this transition is to love the victims. Quite a few of these people are likely to be targeted individuals. Targeted individuals are persons who are being experimented on with the military electromagnetic frequency and scalar technologies. Many of the comments that YouTube wiped out gave us a true picture of how pervasive the scalar wave and electromagnetic frequency technology is. Nevertheless, we're able to work around this advanced weaponry. 2 points. Aubrey answered my statement that enough people know the reality. Aubrey's tweet, which you can see in the teleprompter, says, "We don't need a majority, just a passionate, unwavering 5%. That's us." The fact is that we have managed, despite the scalar weaponry, to break through. The point is that enough of us understand precisely what's going on. Pam has let us know what the banking cartel thought they were doing by putting people to sleep. That has now backfired. No wonder YouTube is trying to hide the teleprompters, because people can read them. They don't have to watch. I'm going to continue to rely on teleprompters, so that little trick won't be effective anymore. Enough people know the reality. The other point to make is one of John Kennedy's favorite sayings, "A rising tide lifts all boats." John Kennedy was just one of the long list of assassinations in the U.S. by the banking cartel. Just like Abraham Lincoln, who was being charged between 20% and 30% interest by the private European central bankers to finance America's Civil War. Both President Lincoln and President Kennedy chose to create a currency outside of private central banker control. The long list of assassinations and attempted assassinations by the banking cartel includes Charles Lindbergh, Andrew Jackson, Huey Long, Louis McFadden, James Buchanan, Warren Harding, Zachary Taylor, James Garfield, William McKinley, and of course Abraham Lincoln and John Kennedy. So we've established that there's a hidden reality and that much of what's hidden from us is corruption. The best part, though, is that one of the things that's hidden from us is the wealth of the world. This wealth won't do us much good if we're not able to access it. There are two reasons why I'm confident that we're going to access the world's wealth. One reason is the power transition model from the National War College that tells us about the very real coalition for the rule of law. The proof that this coalition exists? You can see pieces of it like the BRICS, that's called Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The missing ingredients that you don't see? The people who are responding in my social media. That's why YouTube erases the comments on my YouTube channel. The coalition for the rule of law is only growing stronger, and the fact that YouTube is erasing your comments and my comments they put behind buttons, that shows their weakness. Let's talk about my relationship to you as Overseer Mandate Trustee. I tweeted about this a couple of days ago with a retweet from the 17th of June. The day after reporting major corruption, I asked your permission to represent you in this matter. We've been working on this problem in these weeks now. I need to respect your freedom of choice. The banking cartel tried to ignore this corruption of theirs and thought we were going to drop this. The problem is that all of humanity is going to have to organize itself on a decentralized basis from the grassroots up in order to be able to take decisions for the transition on a non-corrupt basis. And many of these decisions are going to have to be taken up front before the decisions can be taken by humanity. The power of love is a mighty force. The media is hiding the strength of our love from us. We are hardwired to be kind. A study which I reported about in an earlier segment on DCTV by Canadian psychologists has found that much of our joy comes from simply being nice. Being kind to other people makes us happy, the study found. Kindness also improves the way we perceive one another and our outlook on the world. Kind people, it should come as no surprise, see the world as a better place. For 3 years during this series, I've responded to questions, and these remain in an open record for all to see. The banking cartel has to resort to lowering the volume and putting people to sleep, since it has no answers to clear-cut issues, such as a question from Alex Nelson, which was, can you specifically answer what are the indications that we are under martial law? And in my answer, I've addressed this issue in my letter to that agent of the banking cartel, Judge Gorsuch. Judge Gorsuch has not answered my letter. On the 13th of February 2017, I reminded Judge Gorsuch that he needed to respond or he would be bankrupted under a commercial lien. This reality is there for everyone to see, and it's as plain as the nose on your face. There's a cumulative effect to the banking cartel's corruption being exposed. When the Expeditionary Unit of the Marines attacked the CIA's branch office in November 2017, that was on the 18th, and nobody was disciplined for that. Or when the Air Force continues to give me flybys and military salutes and nobody is disciplined, and there's no denial. This undermines the banking cartel. They're no longer credible. I've been retweeting some pretty strong emails, and I'll continue to do this. I'm obviously getting a lot of help. I'm entitled to represent the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. This is evident in the correspondence. I tweeted, I've just been through the cart before the horse problem with the Board of Governors of the World Bank, and I had to convince them that I wasn't assuming their authority. Hopefully, by the upcoming annual meetings, that's when I tweeted this, the board will understand this. I already have a huge position of trust because I'm voting the U.S. shares on the boards of governors and the development committee and the boards of executive directors of the World Bank and IMF until the United States Constitution of 1789 comes back into effect. The U.S. states' governors are not authorized to take any decisions. They forgot to tell people that they refused to give people the titles to their property and are only issuing bogus warranties of title. I've been polling people informally by using the comments section in this series. And the series, of course, you see it. It's live on the 7 o'clock p.m. every other week, and the next week it's going to be pre-taped. And the archives are on YouTube, and I've given the link in the teleprompter. Decisions shouldn't be delegated to experts because of the deep-seated corruption. YouTube is interfering with comments. You can see that emails from the contact page on my website do get through to me, but many of the people who are sending me emails are actually agents of the banking cartel. Honest people and whistleblowers who I worked with for a long time get mind-controlled or intimidated by the threats, and so I can't just delegate to them without double-checking their recommendations. We're headed to a huge bottleneck. My potential solution is to get people to try and understand what's going on in the global currency reset, to get them to try and do better, and to let them know that their performance is going to be audited at some point in the not-too-distant future by our cleansed better selves that have actually decentralized. I've indicated that you should confer with the people who are around you and attempt to come up with a good solution, which is going to be looked into as we get up to speed in the global currency reset. And then I signed that as acting general counsel. And I used the letterhead of the World Bank, and nobody has contradicted me. And people sent out threats from Interpol to arrest me. You see, I'm obviously not arrested. I'm sitting right in front of you. And I'm a credible news source. I provide information to a community that shares my social media audience. And so I'm going to read from you two posts that caught my eye as I was preparing the script. One was posted in November by Alice Castano. Obama accused Russia of cyber attacks while his CIA turned all internet-enabled consumer electronics in Russia into listening devices. And of course the CIA is from the network of global corporate control. Wow. And then there's another comment. The link is scrolling through the teleprompter. Okay, this one is from the New York Times. They complain that the internet threatens democracy. The political order desires to control the population by controlling their perception of reality. For generations, it's been able to do so by establishing and manipulating what we see and hear. And of course, you don't hear that on this show. It looks like we're now ready for me to speak extemporaneously. Oh yeah, I've given you in the teleprompter some links to history of the global debt facility. And you should certainly read that if you'd like. Now let me speak to you a little bit about what I would like to tell the banking cartel. They're in denial. They are ignoring what we know, and that is that the likelihood is very large that the people who know what the corruption is from the banking cartel are all going to interact, and humanity is united, and we're simply not going to continue this corrupt paper currency. We've got all the mechanisms for dismantling it because the banking cartel is bankrupt under the Treaty of Versailles Bonds that are now worth $2 quadrillion because of the compounded interest. So the banking cartel, they're in denial. Let me give you an example to show you what it's like when somebody's in denial. Before I worked at the World Bank, I worked at the U.S. Export-Import Bank, and they're called Boeing's bank because they finance a lot of aircraft from Boeing. And one of the loans had to be repaid from the insurance because the aircraft had crashed. What happened with the crash? There was a general in Ecuador who had been learning from the flight simulators how to fly, and every time he flew an aircraft with a flight simulator, he crashed the plane. So what happened was this very general who was crashing planes thought that the flight simulator was incorrect and he would be able to fly a real plane. And so what he did was he ordered the pilot of the aircraft to step aside because he did have rank, and then he proceeded to do with the real airplane what he did with the flight simulator. He crashed the aircraft and killed everybody on the plane. Now, the analogy that I'm giving you is for the banking cartel. They think that the power transition model is like the flight simulator, and it's not going to predict the reality. They're in denial because this power transition model is very, very accurate. The way it works is people react to each other, they interact, and that's why when I'm talking about the power transition model, I talk about dominoes, because we're now in a huge system of dominoes, and you can see as people interact that they react to one another. And there is a very large reaction from the fact that the CIA was invaded by the Marines. We already know from a number of people in the military that they watch these broadcasts. And I've heard from people that 70% of the military knows very well that the honchos in the military are traitors. And I've been in touch with the people in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and what can I say? They're outed. They're not doing their jobs. They're not protecting the citizens. And of course, when there was a detonation of a nuke on the citizens of Charleston in 2013, and a number of people were fired because they refused to nuke the citizens of Charleston. This didn't go over very well with the U.S. military. So they're on notice, and they're loyal to the citizenry. So what's going to happen during the global currency reset is that all of the world's militaries, they're not going to be loyal to the Knights of Malta and the traitors. They're going to be loyal to the people in their countries, and they're all interacting with each other. So the banking cartel is in denial. It took me a while to prepare for this segment, as I wanted to make it clear to the banking cartel and to the other groups that are interacting in the global currency reset that there is definite progress. A lot of pressure that I felt to bring everyone on board has been lifted as the various groups interact with each other. Oh, I'm told there's 30 seconds. Well, we're in relationship with each other, and stay tuned until next week. Thank you for watching.